صالح المقرن، الهيئة السعودية للمهندسين، مدينة الرياض، المملكة العربية السعودية. أتشرف بأن أرأس هذه الجلسة مع زميلي
فهد الكعبي
من
المؤسسة العامة القطرية للكهرباء والماء دوحة قطر.
عندنا 7 أوراق عمل، تكون إن شاء الله جلسة يعني ما شاء الله دسمة. نبدأ الجلسة الأولى مع الكينوت سبيكر دكتور شكر الله، سوف يتحدث عن الأجرونوميك veterinary sustainable wastewater management and reuse in the Arab region. You have
10 minutes?
No, 15 minutes, inshallah. Dr. Shukrallah is a horticulturist and water environmental expert with more than 25 years of experience in coordinating and managing field-based projects and technical teams involved in site-specific activities. He also served as technical coordination of a 12 million project financed by USAID. Please, the floor is yours.
Wish you all the good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to this important event, and I will be talking about the current situation of wastewater in the Arab region. First of all, I will start by explaining what are the drivers for the reuse of treated wastewater. 3 main drivers: environment, economic efficiency, and also food securities. For the environment, as you can see, it's, we use treated wastewater in order to prevent any groundwater or surface water or coastal water to be polluted by the waste that we send. Also, we use treated wastewater because it's part of the strategy of long-term demand and water supply, and balancing between those two and alleviating the scarcity and improving the conservation of the water. And even for some countries, it's basically the driver is food security. I would say, for example, Jordan now is reusing 95% of their treated wastewater because they need that water. So I'll give you some figures of the potential produced of treated wastewater in different Arab countries, the volume that are treated, and the volume that are reused. You can see some of the countries are reusing most of the treated wastewater. Others are using only part of that treated wastewater. If I count, for example, for Bahrain, I would say Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Syria, if we take only those 3-4 countries, they almost constitute about 80% of the whole treated wastewater reuse in the Arab country. The total amount of wastewater in the Arab region is around 11 billion meter cube.
It's working.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, 11 billion meter cube, from which about 6.5 billion is treated, and 2.2 billion is reused. This amount, it's a huge amount of wastewater that exists in the Arab. This is just, we believe that there is more than that. We believe that maybe we are around 15 billion because all the statistics are not there. Also, very important, this amount is almost equal to the total water mobilized by one country, for example, Morocco. Morocco mobilizes every year 11 billion, so it's a huge amount. But if you look at what it represents in terms of total withdrawal, usually it doesn't go over 10% for the country, for example, like Jordan, but most of the country is less than 2%. of the total withdrawal. If we now talk about what we call the wastewater reuse index, which is the total water that are reused compared to the total water produced, then you can see some countries are much more, in some Arab countries, are reusing more of their potential. Jordan, for example, is reusing now up, I would say, about 95% of the treated wastewater. Qatar is also using a very large, over 60% of the treated wastewater. United Emirates. Other countries, they are still less than 20%. So there is a potential, but very low reuse so far in the Arab. Knowing that there is a scarcity of the water in most of the Arab countries, and it has been already said in the last two sessions. So I would say, to summarize, the annual volume of non-treated wastewater that goes to the environment and maybe even affecting other resources and polluting some ground and surface water, there is around 4.4 billion meter cube. 60% of the potential of the wastewater in the Arab region is treated. This is, I mean, we are compared to, for example, other countries and other continents. In Asia, only 35% is treated. If you go to Latin America, we're having less than 40%. If you go to Africa, it's less than 1%. If you compare ourselves, for example, to Europe, where they're treating around 75%. So, but most of that treated wastewater is reused in agriculture. And sometimes even non-treated or partially treated is reused for producing food, mostly around the urban area. We find that in most Arab countries, most of the food in different countries around the cities are produced using either treated or partially treated wastewater. So what are the main challenge and constraints for the reuse? Why we're still not able to reuse this really additional resource? Because it's an additional resource and it's also a reliable resource. It doesn't be affected by the climate. So one of the reasons is lack of urban water demand management. Also, there is some institution and legal constraint, and most of the time there is unclear policy in the Arab region on the reuse of wastewater, but also there is some environmental risk when you use treated wastewater. Basically, soil salinization or excess of nitrogen sometimes could affect some of the crops, or maybe we already said that yesterday, which is nitrate pollution of the groundwater. There is also an efficient monitoring of the wastewater reuse system. We don't have a very thorough system and a good monitoring system. That's which affect the reuse in a lot of Arab region. We still have limited private sector role in the treated as well as in the reuse. In some country, there is some sign. For example, in Saudi Arabia now, they're doing a lot of privatization about treated wastewater, and there is some private companies as well. In Morocco, there is some what we call a private-public partnership in certain area. But the main also constraint and challenge is the social acceptance of using these treaties for producing food. So the question, given the scarcity of the water, why we are really very slow in promoting wastewater reuse in the Arab region, and how should policymakers adapt the wastewater management agenda to their country economic growth? I think there is a paradox in terms of water scarcity and low reuse in the Arab region, and this is mainly due because environment protection is not really a major concern in most of the Arab countries. There is unclear policy on wastewater reuse. Technology in terms of treating and the reuse, it's sometimes it's a constraint, and the most important is once we have a treatment plan, the operation and maintenance of this treatment plant, it's a major concern. A lot of treatment plants are either overloaded or there is a low management in terms of maintaining the reliability of the treatment. Legal aspect, sometimes some restriction of treated wastewater was a constraint in the reuse of wastewater. For example, in Tunisia, when farmers were asked to use the treated wastewater, they said, we would like to use the treated wastewater, but if you let us grow crops that we need, that give us more money, especially vegetable crops. And it was forbidden in Tunisia to use treated wastewater. So farmers are reluctant in using this treated wastewater. From the projection of using, Tunisia has developed around 20,000 hectares equipped with treated wastewater. Up to now, only 8,000 is using treated wastewater. Institutional conflict between the different departments concerned, an unclear mandate in terms of the different departments and who will be responsible of what. There is also lack of awareness program within the Arab countries. Factor also impeding the implementation of water reuse. There is a lack of insufficiency of economic analysis. The high cost of treating wastewater is sometimes, it's a very constraint, because you should not only treat, but you have to treat and convey all the water to the area where it has to be. And this cost, and also reduce the reuse of treated wastewater. Some technical and social issues are also limiting the reuse, and also difficulty in creating financial incentive for safe and efficient use by promoting private sectors. Okay, public, I have 25 minutes normally. No. Okay. Public health is also a problem, and also environment risk, as well lack of monitoring, which I already said. This has been already said. So, in terms of guidelines, most of the Arab countries doesn't have a common standards. Most of Gulf countries are more devoting their standards for using EPA standards, which is zero risk standards, as compared to other countries like Morocco, Tunisia, and other. They're using basically the WHO guidelines. And this table shows you the different guidelines depending on the country where you are. Saudi Arabia, for example, is using EPA, and if you go to Morocco, it's usually going to WHO, and which is also used by France, the WHO standards. In terms of technology, depend where you are. If you are in a very high rich country like the Gulf, they use a high-tech technology in energy consuming, which go up to, sometime in Kuwait, they go up to reverse osmosis system. As you go for other low-income country, they use more extensive technology, sand filters, lagoons, aerated lagoon, and also constructed wetlands. In terms of best practices in the reuse, different country, we have some successful stories all over the Arab country. In Jordan, for me, it's the good example. And if we have to learn, we have to go and learn more about the reuse in Jordan, because now 95% of the reuse of the treated wastewater is reused. They grow in different crops, including palm trees, alfalfa, olives. If you go to Tunisia, also have a good success stories in terms of the reuse for fruit trees, peaches, olives, as well as clementine. If you go, also most of the reuse now, and it has been common all over the Arab country, is used for golf courses. And you go to Tunisia, a lot of water is treated wastewater used for golf courses. In Ben Sliman in Morocco, and also in Kuwait. Also for another use is to create what you call humid area for recreation, and it's something that is also very important for the reuse. Landscaping in other countries, for example, Abu Dhabi, where most of the landscape and the greening of the cities has been using treated wastewater. In Kuwait, nursery production, even going up to producing soil sculpture, is used in Kuwait with treated wastewater. If you go also in Egypt, there is a lot of area that has been growing trees for different use, even industry crops for oil production. Recharge, I think we already talked about it yesterday. And we can gain not only from our experience, but also we can gain from a broad experience. Cyprus use 85% of their treated waste for growing all kinds of crops. The US in California, if you go to San Joaquin Valley, most of the strawberry as well as the green beans are grown with treated wastewater. And the last example is Singapore, where recycling water for even to be potable water, they call it new water, it's going through microfiltration, reverse osmosis, as well ultraviolet disinfection. So what is the forward in terms of the reuse and solution for the reuse for the Arab country by the coming year? We should move from restricted treated wastewater to non-restricted. That means that we have to go to much more advanced treatment, at least the tertiary treatment. We have to mobilize financial resources for adequate wastewater treatment and encourage public-private partnership in wastewater treatment and reuse. Most Arab countries have developed regulation framework, but they're not implemented. That's the problem. We have rules, we have different regulation, but we need to reinforce their application. We need also to develop some awareness within all the country for the reuse of treated wastewater. Last slide is we need to enhance the monitoring system. Otherwise, people will not be encouraged to reuse treated, because if they don't know it's reliable, we have to develop our capacity in terms of skills to support all the institutions that are responsible for the reuse. And also we need to encourage cooperation and exchange of information to establish a platform for dissemination of all the lessons learned from existing facility in the Arab region, and that help us not to repeat the same things again. Also, commitment to wastewater reuse should be part of proclaimed water policy and strategy in all countries of the Arab region. Arab countries should develop a comprehensive plan of action for reusing treated wastewater, which clearly assign the roles. We need a clear action plan. We had enough of talk. We had enough about, we know the solutions. We know what should be done, but we need to act. So with this, I thank you very much and hope to have some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shukrallah, for being on the time and giving a clear presentation.
And our second keynote speakers, he's a head of the Civil Engineering Department at Al-Najah National University Department. He's associated professor of water resources, and he is a professional engineering with the Board of the Engineering of the State of Colorado. He graduated from Colorado Universities on the Doctor of Philosophy from Colorado State University, Fort Collins, Colorado, 1990, Master of Science, Colorado State University, Fort Collins, Colorado, 1988. Let's welcome all our professor and the second keynote speakers, Dr. Naaman Mazyed.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's my pleasure being here with you this morning. And I'm going to be talking about treated wastewater reuse in the West Bank. It would be a continuation of the talk for the first speaker, who talked generally about the Arab world and what are the potential for treated wastewater reuse. In this presentation, what I am going to do, I am going to take a case study. It's the case of the West Bank. And I want to start with the prospects, the potentials for the reuse in the West Bank, and then go over the challenges and the problems which are associated with wastewater reuse. I will go over the Palestinian regulations and the standards in the area of reuse, as we talked earlier in the past 2 days about, and also by the previous speaker, about the regulations. And then I go on the farm level and present some results of interviews from farmers. How do they see the regulations, and how would they, let's say, look at those regulations, because I think it's very important to see also the farmer's point of view. First of all, I'd like just to start with some pictures from where I come from. This is our university, Al-Najah National University. It's located in the city of Nablus. The city of Nablus is located between two mountains, and you can see how the cities look like. This is the old town of Nablus. You can see that it's densely populated, and then when people have to expand, they got to go vertically. However, when you step outside, just outside the town, this is a general view for the western slopes in the West Bank. You can see that the majority of land is hilly areas, with olives are the most dominant crop in the West Bank, covering maybe over 20% of the land. But you can see also in the picture a lot of land which is not suitable for agriculture and could be used only for grazed lands due to the high slopes in the land. There are small plains or flatlands are very small in percentage in the West Bank. Usually they are used in field crops, rain-fed agriculture. When you go to the other side of the West Bank, the eastern side, of course, there's a difference between the pictures. This picture is in summer. The previous pictures were in spring, so that's the greenish in the first few pictures. Now, the eastern side of the West Bank is mostly dry, very dry actually, with steep slopes and very shallow soils, and it is not that inhabited, or most of the population is located over the mountains. Irrigation is important, and it has a pivotal role in the agricultural sector in the West Bank. And irrigation, or generally speaking, agriculture is still up to now, it is more traditional, using trickle irrigation, open field agriculture. People are moving now towards greenhouses, and because of the limitations or on the use of methyl bromide, nowadays they are switching into hydroponic systems to plant in greenhouses. Agriculture is very important in the West Bank, and as the previous speakers spoke earlier, or other speakers talked about the importance of agriculture and how water is the most limiting factor. Now in the West Bank, agriculture used to contribute about 30% of the GDP in 1960s. Now it dropped to about 5%. However, it has an important contribution to the labor force, as nowadays about 13% of the population work in agriculture. Agriculture, 22% of agriculture is rain-fed. That's production-wise, or let's say the value of agricultural production. Rain-fed is about 22%. Irrigated agriculture is 39 or 40%, although irrigated agriculture is a much smaller area. The limiting factor is water, not land. However, when we talk about land in the West Bank, only 1/3 of the land in the West Bank is suitable for agricultural cultivation. Only 11% of the total land is suitable for irrigated agriculture. The total area which is irrigated nowadays, we are talking about 130,000 dunams compared to about 1.5 million dunams rain-fed agriculture. However, those 130,000 dunams are producing much more than the 1.5 million dunams. Water supply, when we look at water supply in the West Bank, we have the groundwater aquifers with a natural discharge of about 648. However, the amount of water used is much less because of the Israeli restrictions. Nowadays, the domestic sector is consuming about 100 million cubic meters per year. Agriculture use has dropped, It used to be 90 to 100 MCM. Now it went down to 60 or 70 MCM because of more diversion of water from agriculture to the domestic sector. Those are the main aquifers that we have in the West Bank: northeastern, western aquifer, and eastern aquifer. The richest groundwater aquifer is the western aquifer. However, naturally it flows into the Green Line inside Israel, so there are restrictions on the use of that aquifer, that you cannot drill wells. Most of the wells in the West Bank are located in the eastern aquifer, which is a much deeper aquifer. It is much more expensive to utilize that aquifer. Our future perspectives, we see that there would be increased demands for fresh water. Less water would be available, which is expected everywhere in the Arab region, that less water would be available for agriculture. And when we think of irrigation, you have to move on to high cash crops, which could afford the expensive prices of water. So that's why there would be more towards the use of treated wastewater, and this would be accompanied with the more production of treated wastewater that we expect in the future, and all of that would be diverted into agricultural use. The status of the wastewater systems in the West Bank: we have about 500 villages, towns, cities. Only 16 towns have collection systems for wastewater. With the treatment side, we have only one treatment plant which is running effectively. However, there are many ongoing projects and studies on the design of collection and treatment of wastewater systems in the West Bank, and that's what puts reuse as an important aspect of those studies. So up to now, or what's going on now, is more towards studying and evaluating the options of reuse, which is accompanied always with the treatment and the collection. The reuse activities nowadays still minor activities at the only operating treatment plant in the West Bank, which is at Al-Zubari, and there are particular reasons for the lack of reuse in that area. It's simply the land is not available in that area where the treatment plant is located. It's located in a mountainous area, Area C, with restriction on the development by the Palestinians because of nearby Israeli settlements. In other areas, you have some water which is being dumped in open valleys, or most of the areas, water is being dumped in open valleys, and as soon as it gets into the Green Line, we get charged by the Israel on its treatment. Some of the wastewater, which is untreated, flows by gravity until it gets to some freshwater springs where it gets mixed and then it gets used in agriculture, and that is in the northern parts of the West Bank. Now, because of so many studies which have been done and so many plans which are being implemented to treat and reuse wastewater, the Palestinian Authority has been issuing standards and evaluating standards and regulations for the reuse of wastewater. There was the standard BSI 742 in 2003 by the Palestine Standards Institute, and then recently there is another standard which was issued in early this year. In the regulations, the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for monitoring the reuse by the farmers. Farmers, when they want to do reuse, they need to get a reuse permit from the Ministry of Agriculture. The reuse permit specifies what type of use is going to be done, and if the reuse is not according to standards, the action of the Ministry of Agriculture would be usually to demolish or to uproot the plant. So the Ministry of Agriculture requires the reuse to be in accordance to the Palestine standards, and it requires some additional requirements on the farm. It requires that the pipes which are used in treated wastewater to have a certain color. It requires people to be dressing certain clothing, and it requires a lot of hygiene activities which should be done on the farm for reuse to be permitted. Okay, so when we talk about standards, it's important to look at the quality that you are going to treat. Usually we talk about, let's say, high concentration of BODs, CODs, total nitrogen, total phosphorus. The TDS usually we talk about 1,500 to 2,000, that's in the wastewater. The pH is 7.3 to 8.1. The standards classify water, and this is important in deciding how the reuse is going to be done. We classify water as grades A, B, and C, depending on the BOD, COD, total suspended solids, and total nitrogen. It's very important. In addition to the fecal coliforms, the idea of the Palestinian standards that the reuse, you use a number of barriers depending on the type of wastewater you produce. So if the quality of wastewater that you are producing is low, what you do is you increase the number of barriers depending on the type of crop. The standards do not allow the reuse to reuse wastewater in irrigating vegetables. Other crops would require a number of barriers. So there are, let's say, according to the standards, there are a lot of potential crops that you could utilize for agriculture. The amounts that we expect for agriculture, we expect that we will have the domestic water to double, which means that we might be able to utilize treated wastewater much more than the amount of fresh water which is currently available for agriculture, which have the potential of doubling the amount of irrigated area. There are some particular operational problems related to the pattern of evapotranspiration precipitation. What happens is in winter, and this is a critical issue, that in winter you have more precipitation than evapotranspiration. Then what would you use with, what would you do with that wastewater? Because if it is going to be dumped in wadis, it has to follow the Israeli standards, which are more restricted. Especially regarding to, the total nitrogen, so the treatment would become not affordable. We took some sample interviews and questionnaires from farmers all over the West Bank to see what are their characteristics and how do they look at reuse. We found, generally speaking, agriculture in the West Bank is a family business. However, it is most of people who deal with agriculture are actually educated, and the size of area cultivated by families is usually small, and generally speaking, those who cultivate the land own the land, which would give you an opportunity to do more public awareness and more work with the farmers to encourage them for reuse and to educate them into different methods and different alternatives for treated wastewater. Farmers in general, they worry, and their worries are everywhere the same. They worry about the safety, the marketing, and generally speaking, they are willing to pay, but usually pay the pumping cost from the treatment plant to the farms. We saw that there are significant impacts in public awareness when we started some public awareness programs, how the farmers would look at reuse activities and acceptance of reuse. We found that there is a discrepancy between how the farmers look at reuse and what the farmers think of reuse in terms of crops, in terms of activities, and what we have in the standards. That's what we need to say in the end, that there is a need to address the farmer concerns in adopting standards and regulations. The standards should not just be written in Ramallah by somebody up in the ministry. There should be more interactions with the farmers to see how they think, how do they look at reuse, and there might be a necessary to relax some of the standards in the first stages to encourage people to for reuse and to always involve the community in treated wastewater projects. One critical issue is the location of the projects, in addition to address master planning and zoning in areas and towns in the cities, because we have a large number of areas, a large number of towns and cities, which would result in decentralized wastewater activity, a large number of treatment plants, which would make a problem in deciding the location of the plants. So, and there's a need to address the extra cost which is required by those standards if we want the farmers to be involved and to be working. I hope I took only my time, so thank you very much.
Shukran.
Thank you, Professor Naaman, for keeping the time.
Thank you. Bismillah.